was the food ready yet?
Ooh.
Your food.
Come on, scriptures, help me out here. All right, there we go. Whew. Okay, hold on. Let me get this background noise out of here. All right, there we go. Shalom, everyone. I'm Brother Doug with the Awakened by Yahuah Fellowship in Yahuah Almighty, Yahushua Messiah. Today we are going to be doing a continuation of 2 Samuel. So I think I'll have my mom, Sister Sharon, start us out.
Okay. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses, and with 50 men to run ahead of him. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" He would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Yashrael." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case would come to me, and I would see that he gets justice." Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Absalom behaved in this way toward all the children of Israel who came to the king asking for justice. And so he stole the hearts of the men of Yashrael. At the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to Yahuah. While your servant was living at Gesher in Aram, I made this vow. If Yahuah takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship Yahuah in Hebron." The king said to him, "Go in peace." So he went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Yashrael to say, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, 'Absalom is king in Hebron.'" 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went quite innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Achitophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown. And so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. A messenger came and told David, "The hearts of the men of Yashrael are with Absalom." Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. He must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin upon us and put the city into the sword." The king's officials answered him, "Your servants are ready to do whatever our master the king chooses." The king set out with his entire household following him, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted to a place some distance away. All his men marched past him, along with the Keretites and Peletites and all the 600 Gizonites who had accompanied him from Gath, marched before the king. The king said, to Ittai the Gittite, "Why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You are a foreigner, an exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday, and today shall I make you wander about with us when I do not know where I am going? Go back and take your countrymen. May kindness and faithfulness be with you." But Ittai replied to the king, "As surely as Yahuwah lives, and as my sovereign the king lives, wherever my master the king may be, whether it means life or death, there your servant will be." David said to Ittai, "Go ahead, march on." So Ittai the Gittite marched on with all his men and the families that were with him. The whole countryside wept aloud as all the people passed by. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people moved on toward the desert. Zadok was there too, and all the Levites who were with him were carrying the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah. They set down the ark of Yahuwah, and Abiathar offered sacrifices until all the people had finished leaving the city. Then the king said to Zadok, "Take the ark of Yahuwah back into the city. If I find favor in Yahuwah's eyes, he will bring me back and let me see it and his dwelling place again. But if he says, I am not pleased with you, then I am ready. Let him do to me whatever seems good to him." The king also said to Zadok the priest, "Aren't you a seer? Go back to the city in peace with your son Ahimaaz and Jonathan, son of Abiathar. You and Abiathar take your 2 sons with you. I will wait at the fjords in the desert until word comes from you to confirm me, to inform me." So Zadok and Abiathar took the ark of Yahuwah back to Jerusalem and stayed there. But David continued up the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered, and he was barefoot. All the people with him covered their heads too, and were weeping as they went up. Now David had been told, Achitophel is among conspirators with Absalom. So David prayed, "O Yahuwah, turn Achitophel counsel into foolishness." When David arrived at the summit where people used to worship Yahuwah, Hushai the Azkite was there to meet him, his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, "If you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant. Then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. Won't the priest Zadok and Abiathar be there with you? Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Their 2 sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, and there with them, send them to me with anything you hear." So David's friend Hushai arrived at Jerusalem at Absalom was entering the city.
All right, so this is where Absalom is starting to usurp the kingship. He's trying to get people to go against David. Yeah.
There's not a whole lot you can say about that. I mean, he was
Now, this is interesting. The later part of this chapter is talking about returning the ark. Now, I wonder why the ark would not be at the temple at this point.
Yeah.
It's saying the king said to Zadok, return the ark of Yahuah to the city if I find favor in the eyes. And the king said to Zadok the priest, look, you are turning back the city in peace, and Achimas, your son, and Jonathan, the son of Abiathar, your two sons with you. Just looking here and seeing what else it's saying about Zadok here. Okay. So it seems like he's warning Zadok and Abiathar about what Absalom is doing. And David's also. You okay?
Yeah.
So anyway, so he's also he's asking Yahuah even to turn Absalom's counsel against Absalom. So he's actually David is going to Yahuah asking him, pleading him to basically to defeat Absalom for him. And so, other than that, that's pretty much what this chapter is about. This is Absalom trying to turn the people against David, trying to get David's throne. David goes to Yahuah, then gathers up the people that haven't really took counsel with Absalom yet. And that's about it. And then obviously we have the the return of the Ark of the Covenant, David telling them to return the Ark of Yahuah back into the city. It's pretty self-explanatory there.
Now, when they say the summit, what is that actually referring to?
Summit means a meeting.
Okay, yeah, well, that
like King Arthur times, they would be like, let's make a summit, let's hold a summit. It's like a council. Yeah, it's an old English word. I'm surprised your Bible uses words like that.
Yeah, it does.
Because that's a very
I
old
wanted to see if the
Middle
King
English
James was using that too.
What verse is it that you're talking about?
It's chapter 16.
Oh, you're already reading ahead. Okay, that's why.
Maybe I'm wrong about that.
From what I remember, though, a summit is like a council or a meeting.
Yeah, here it is. It's in verse, chapter 15, verse 32. I was just wondering for myself what they meant by summit. So when David arrived at the summit, where people used to worship Yahuwah.
Oh, the summit. I actually, in that context, could mean like the mountain. I'm wondering if it.
Okay.
I do know the word summit can also mean like the top of something, a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And what verse was that again?
15, verse 32.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I would assume the context of that, it's talking about a mountaintop.
Top of the mountain, it says in the King James.
Yeah.
It was come to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Where he worshipped. Yeah. See, I like this better. It's more, for this particular passage, it really is a little bit more.
Yeah, summit's a very old word. I'm surprised the NIV is using summit. That's a very old word. So that's kind of why it's not one of my favorites for the contemporary Bibles, because it still uses Middle English, so it kind of defeats the purpose as being a contemporary English Bible. So interesting. This is the one time where the Septuagint uses the name of the place rather than what it is. Like this time, it's actually transliterated. David came up as far as Rosh, where he worshipped. So he actually gives you the name of the mountaintop rather than just saying mountaintop. Rosh is the name of the place where he worshipped Elohim. And behold, Cushi, the chief friend of David, came out to meet him, having rent his garment. The earth was upon his head, meaning, dirt, earth. That's what earth actually means in the Hebrew and the Greek. It actually means ground or dirt. It does not mean a planet. It means ground or a plane. But yeah, so yeah, that's why I never caught that, because the Septuagint doesn't use summit either. They call the name of the place Rus or Rush. So I guess that's the name of the mountaintop. Let me just see here. So other than that, there's not much to explain here. I could have us continue here. I'm not really seeing much to expound upon, other than Dawood was so upset he rented his garments. I think he was just upset that people so close to him would, turn on him that quickly. And I'm not even talking about Absalom. I'm talking about the people he got after him. Is why he was mourning. He knew that Absalom was against him, but he never thought someone that close to him, Choosby, would be, stabbing him in the back like that. Because in verse 32 it says, Choosby, the chief friend of David, came out to meet him. Oh, okay, never mind. So Choosby is still his friend. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 16. And Dawood passed some little way. And behold, there was Seba, the lad of the Memphibosheth, to meet him, a couple of donkeys fully laden, upon them 200 loaves of bread and 100 raisins and 100 dates, and a nabel of wine. And the king said to Seba, why do you have these things? And Seba said, the draft animals are for the household of the king to sit upon, and the loaves of bread, and the dates for food for the lads, and the wine for those who are faint in the wilderness. And the king said, and where is the son of your master? And Seba said to the king, behold, he sits in Jerusalem, for he said, today the house of Yashrael will return to me the kingdom of my father. And the king said to Seba, behold, everything is yours that belongs to Mephibosheth. And doing obeisance, Seba said, may I find favor in your sight, my master, O king. And King Daud came to Bahurim, and behold, a man from the king's folk of the house of Shaul went out there. So I'm guessing he's in a Benjamite territory, because it's talking about someone from the household of Shaul came out to meet him. His name was Shimei, son of Gerah. He came out, going out, cursing and stoning with stones Daud and all the servants of Daud, King Daud. And there were all the people, and all the powerful men were on the right and the left of the king. And thus Shimei kept saying while he cursed, get out, man of blood and lawless man. Yahuwah returned on you all the blood of the house of Shaul, for you became king in his stead, and Yahuwah gave the kingdom into the hand of Abessalom, your son, and behold, you are in your bad state, for you are a man of blood. So basically, really the only reason Absalom has all these people going to his side is because you have people from Saul's household that are holding a grudge against David. And, you know, and in actuality, if you go back to the story of David and Saul, David never killed him. He could have killed him. He would have had a right to kill him. He never did. And so for this guy to say to David, oh, you man of bloodshed, this and that, you know, this guy is basically railing false accusations against David. Saul killed himself. David had nothing to do with it. Same thing with Jonathan. So this guy obviously does not know the story. He does not know the full story. Abesa, son of Suriah, said to the king, why does the dead dog curse my master? Why does this dead dog curse my master the king? I will surely walk over and take off his head. And the king said, what have I to do with you, O sons of Suriah? Leave him alone, and so let him curse, because Yahuwah told him to curse Daud, and who shall say, to what end did you do so? And Daud said to Abesa and to all his servants, behold, my son who came out of my belly seeks my life now, besides the son of Lamini. Leave him alone to curse because Yahuwah told him. If somehow Yahuwah may look on my humiliation, he will return to me 2 things in the place of this curse today. And Daud and his men went on the road. And Shimei was going to the side of the mountain next to him, going and cursing and stoning the stones with its flanks and sprinkling with dirt. And the king came and all his people exhausted, and they recovered there. And Absalom and every man of Yashrael entered into Jerusalem, and Achitophel was with him. And it happened when Chuzi, Archi, a companion of Daud, came to Absalom, that Chuzi said to Absalom, let the king live. And Absalom said, Chuzi, is this your mercy with your companion? Why did you not go away with your companion? And Chuzi said to Absalom, no, but hereafter he whom Yahuwah and his people and every man of Yashrael have chosen, his I will be, with him I will sit. And secondly, to whom will I subject? Is it not in the presence of his son? Just as I was subject in the presence of your father, so will I be in your presence. And Absalom said to Achitophel, bring forth counsel among yourselves what we should do. And Achitophel said to Absalom, go into the concubines of your father, whom he left behind to keep his house. And all Yashrael will hear that you put your father to shame, and the hands of all who are with you will be strengthened. And they pitched the tent for Absalom upon the roof, and Absalom went into the concubines of his father in the sight of all Yashrael, and the counsel of Achitophel, which he counseled in the former days, was in as if one were to inquire by a word of Eluah, so was all the counsel of Achitophel, and indeed to Daud, and to indeed to Absalom. So, this is what happens when you listen to the wrong counsel. First of all, no matter how much hatred he had for David, to outright willfully sin and sleep with his dad's wives, essentially, is what he did. He committed adultery against his own dad. He's obviously taking the wrong type of counsel. And obviously Absalom, I don't know how old he would have been at that point, but he obviously is a young man that really, according to his history of his actions, he likes to act before thinking. Even when it's righteous, he does it without seeking counsel usually. He'll just do it because it feels good. Like, for example, he took revenge on his sister because his sister got raped. He didn't really take counsel before doing that. He just went out and killed his brother. Okay, so the problem with Absalom is he's a man of action, but rarely ever uses his brain. That's the same theme throughout his whole life is, okay, well, this seems right, I'm going to do it. He never has ever seeked Yahuwah on anything. He's never ever said, hey, Yahuwah, is this really from you? Is this Achitophel guy telling me something that's from you, that I should be taking my father's kingdom, this or that? He doesn't care. He's doing his own will. And that's really how I look at Absalom. He's like, he's a guy that does his own will. He doesn't care about what's right. It's really about what's right in his eyes, and that's it, which we can all relate to. There's times in our lives where we've been extremely selfish, and it's all about me, all about me, all about me type of thing. But Absalom, we never even see a time where he seeks Yahuwah on anything, on any type of matter. He's always doing his own will. So,
yeah.
You got anything you want to add?
I don't think so.
So that would be the lesson I would take from so far today, is definitely from chapter 16, is you want to do the exact opposite of what Absalom did. Make sure that someone that's bringing you a word is from Yahuwah, because again, and I can respect David's opinion on the matter about the guy cursing him. At the same time, just because someone is sent to curse you doesn't mean Yahuwah did it. I think David was mourning so much, and he was so much like in a depressed state that he just assumed that was from Yahuwah. And it's not good to assume things like that, because really David did not do anything to be cursed like that from that guy from the household of Saul. He did not harm Saul. He did not harm Jonathan. So as far as we can tell from the story, I doubt it was Yahuwah sending that guy to curse him. I seriously doubt it. Am I wrong for saying that?
No, I don't think so.
From that chapter 15, was there anything, or early in chapter 16, was there anything indicating that Yahuwah sent the guy to curse him? I don't think so. So I think David was just
felt in his heart that he had done something wrong, or this wouldn't have happened to him.
Yeah.
I know I know how he would be thinking.
Yeah. I know he felt like Absalom was his fault, obviously because of that curse. So I understand why he felt like Absalom was his fault. And this guy, though, I think a lot of times when you got families that go through hardship, like Saul's house, is Absalom can take advantage of people like that.
Mm-hmm.
Say, well, see, well, he caused your father to die and your brother to die and this and that. And when in actuality, David was not guilty in that matter whatsoever. And and yeah, I could understand, sis. That is a good point. I can understand from his point of view why he would feel that way. Um, but that's why I'm very careful before assuming anything's from Yahuwah, even in a negative way, because the enemy can do things too. The enemy can turn people against you. Um, and the fact of the matter is, Absalom was very wicked at this point, and he was getting people to turn on David left and right. And he was using anything he could, whether it was past mistakes David made, um, whatever it was, he was using that to get the whole kingdom to revolt. And so I think Daoud at this point, I do believe we should be as hard on ourselves as scripturally possible, but I think there's an extent of it where you start becoming too hard on yourself and you allow the guilt to consume you of past sins. And I think that's what's happening with David there. I think he like literally got to the point where he felt like, well, all this bad stuff's happening is because of my past sins. All this bad stuff's happening to me. The thing was that Yahuwah cursed him that there would be strife in his household. Yahuwah never said he was going to bring Saul's house against him. He never cursed him and said
That's
that.
right.
So when you actually look at the curse that Yahuwah gave him through Nathan back then, it had nothing to do with Saul's household. So that's the reason I believe it was definitely not from Yahuwah. It was the enemy trying to pile guilt upon him. And sometimes we allow the enemy to do that. We allow the enemy to constantly attack us with all this guilt and stuff like that of past sins, and thinking that if anything bad happens to us, it's because of our past sins. And you see, Israel even had that mindset when Messiah came. And what was mom? One of the disciples said to him, "Oh, what did his parents do for him to be born blind?"
Yeah, right.
Automatically assuming a guy's born blind because of his parents'
Because
sins.
of his,
So that's where we have to be careful, because then we get into that weird type of theology of any type of hardship that happens is from Yahuwah, which obviously the book of Job debunks that. So that's why I say it's important to be careful, because we have to realize too that yes, Yahuwah will sometimes allow hardships to happen to punish us, but at the same time, sometimes we're not in sin for that to happen, and still happens.
It still happens.
So sometimes it has nothing to do with any sin we ever committed. Sometimes Yahuwah will allow us to be tested like that. And this situation, and I can't really prove it, but this situation, I think, with Saul's household was a test to see how much David could endure. And what I found interesting, and maybe I'm reaching with this, his one guy was going to draw out his sword, right, or whatever. Or I thought it was interesting because it was like an interesting parallel to the Garden of Gethsemane, where where Peter was about to draw his sword and attack the guy. And he's like, Yahusha told him not to. So I just thought that was interesting. Other than that, I don't know what else is really in chapter 16 here we could talk about. Reigned in the stead. Okay. Chief friend of David. Okay. Oh yeah. Obviously the concubine thing's horrible. And I really believe there was a sexual demon attached to David's family. I think there was a generational curse, in my opinion, When the Bathsheba thing and David happened, I don't think that spirit ever left. That spirit of lust left. Because you see that his one son trying to rape his own sister, you know. Then you got Absalom, acting upon horrible counsel, taking all of his dad's concubines. Basically he did what Reuben did, but like 10 times worse. And you always see like a sexual sin issue in David's lineage. So I'm wondering if there's like a familiar spirit that's constantly trying to, destroy David's line. And I could see the devil working like that and saying, okay, let me have this particular spirit latch on to them. That way they keep sinning, and Yahuwah eventually has to, because I can see the devil's mindset is, if I can get them to keep messing up, keep sinning, and they keep committing these type of sins, Yahuwah will eventually cut them off from being king. And I think the devil was trying to find a way to get the line of Judah away from being, the tribe of the kingship. So if the devil could do that at the minimum, then he would cause, he thought in his mind that Yahuwah would have to be forced to break his word. So see, the devil, he's smart, but he has limited understanding when it comes to Yahuwah. He has limited understanding because, again, he was only good for the first 6 days of creation. He was only good until he fell. So he didn't know, Yahuwah didn't really, it's kind of like the old saying, Yahuwah taught them everything they know. He taught the angels everything they know. He didn't teach them everything he knows. So you got the devil being cast down with limited understanding, and he's like, okay, this is what I have to do to stop this prophecy from happening, from Genesis 3 from happening. But what he doesn't understand is Yahuwah was never going to ever cast aside Judah. That's what he didn't know.
Right.
And he could attack Judah as much as he wanted. Yahuwah was never going to renounce them as the tribe that the kings are to come through. So the devil thought he could get Yahuwah to do that, but Yahuwah doesn't break his word, no matter what. No matter what. So the devil was kind of not that smart in that area. He kind of did the wrong strategy, you could say. But the devil's smart, but we shouldn't give him too much credit because he kind of screws himself sometimes. He thinks he's handcuffing Yahuwah. In a way, Yahuwah's actually allowing him to do what he does, and Yahuwah's already 2 or 3 steps ahead of him. And he's like, okay, yeah, you're going to do this, but watch and see what I'm about to do after you do that, type of thing.
It's an old expression. I'll give you enough rope to hang yourself,
Yeah. So, but I do think there was some type of sexual sin issue in David's lineage because you see this repeating itself. But at the end of the day, the biggest thing I could take away from the chapter is don't be like Absalom. You take the wrong counsel. You're never seeking Yahuwah. You're doing whatever you think is right in your own eyes. And you're never even seeking Yahuwah to see if you're doing what's right in his eyes, which we're all guilty of at times. But he did it so far to the extent of that he never seeked Yahuwah ever. He just completely did only what was right in his eyes and never even thought to pray, never even thought to seek him. So it's a perfect example of what not to do. So, and seeking counsel from a wicked guy. If a guy's telling me to sleep with my father's wife or concubines, I'm not listening to that guy.
Yeah.
So, Absalom became a very wicked man. I think there's even legends about him. I want to look something up real quick. I think there's a legend about him where he became certain legends have him. Let me see here. Absalom. I remember there was something tying him to vampirism in one of the legends. I wanted to see something about that. Yeah, supposedly in the vampire mythos, Absalom is supposedly the first ever vampire, which definitely is not true.
Oh gosh.
But because obviously there would have been people doing vampirism way before Absalom. But yeah, interesting nonetheless that Absalom would have actually became supposedly he at some point would have been doing vampirism supposedly. I want to see something if there's any proof to that. Absalom. Yeah. I'm not seeing any proof to it. Just interesting. It's just interesting that they supposedly that they have him as a vampire in mythology. So I don't know what to make of that. If that's just a legend, I could have swore we saw something in Second Samuel at some point where he's like drinking blood or something along that lines. Um, but anyway, he's a wicked guy nonetheless. But anyway, let's see here. Who hasn't read yet? Let's see. Brother Dennis, let me just try to unmute you here. Brother Dennis, would you like to read 2 Samuel 17?
17? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. And Achitophel said to Absalom, please let me choose 12,000 men and let me rise and pursue David tonight and come upon him while he is weary and weak. And I shall make him afraid, and all the people who are with him shall flee. And I shall strike the sovereign alone and bring back all the people to you when all return except the man whom you seek. All the people should be at peace. And the saying pleased Absalom and all the elders of Yisrael. But Absalom said, now call Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear what he says too. And Hushai came to Absalom, and Absalom spoke to him, saying, Ahithophel has spoken according to the word. Should we do as he says? If not, speak up. And Hushai said to Absalom, the advice that Achitophel has given is not good at this time. And Hushai said, you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are as bitter in being as a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. And your father is a man of battle, and would not spend the night with the people. See, by now he is hidden in some pit or in some place, and it shall be when some of them fall at the first that whoever hears it shall say, there has been a slaughtering among the people who are following Absalom. And even he who is brave, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, would utterly melt. For all Yisrael knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are brave men. But I advise that all Yisrael without fail be gathered to you from Dan to Beersheba, as numerous and as the sand by the sea, and that you yourself go to battle. and we shall come upon him in some place where he is found, and follow him as the dew falls on the ground, and there shall be left with him of all the men with him not even one. And if he withdraws into the city, then all Yisrael shall bring ropes to that city, and we shall put it into the wadi until there is not one small stone found there. Absalom and all the men of Yisrael then said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Achitophel, for Yahuah has ordained to nullify the two advice of Achitophel for the sake of Yahuah, bringing evil upon Absalom. Hushai then said to Zadok and to Abiathar the priest, Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Yisrael such and such, but I have advised them so and so. Send hastily and inform David, saying, do not spend this night in the desert plains of the wilderness, but pass over without fail, lest the sovereign and all the people with him be swallowed up. And Jonathan and Abimaaz were stationed in Rogel, and a female servant would come and inform them. And they would go and inform sovereign David, or they could not be seen entering the city. But a youth saw them and informed Absalom. So the two of them went away at once and came to a man's house in Bahurim, who had a well in his courtyard, and they went down into it. And the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth and spread ground grain on it, so the matter was not known. And the servants of Absalom came to the woman at the house and said, where are Abimaaz and Jonathan? And the woman said to them, they have passed over the stream of water. And they looked and did not find them, and returned to Jerusalem. And it came to be, after they had left, that they came up out of the well and went and informed sovereign David, and said to David, arise and pass over the water quickly, for thus Ahithophel has advised against you. And David and all the people who were with him rose up and passed over the Jordan, and by morning light not even one remained who had not gone over the Jordan. And Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed. So he saddled his donkey and rose up and went home to his house in his city. Then he gave command to his house and hanged himself and died. And he was buried in his father's burial site. And David said to Mahanaim, and Absalom passed over the Jordan, he and all the men of Yisrael with him. And Absalom appointed Amasa over the army instead of Joab. Now Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Yithra, a Yisraeli, who had gone in to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. And Yisrael and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. And it came to be, when David had come to Mahanaim, that Shophi, son of Nahash, from Rabbah, of the children of Ammon, and Machir, son of Ammiel, from Lozabar, and Barzillai, and the Gileadite, from Roglim, brought beds and basins and earthen vessels and wheat, and barley and flour, and roasted grain and beans, and lentils and parched vegetables, and honey and curds, and sheep and cheese of the herd, for David and the people who were with him to eat. They said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. Doug is muted.
Huh?
Doug
Oh.
is muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Dennis. Dennis was reminding me I was muted. My bad. That was, yeah, and that's a shame because I was getting to a point here. Verse 14 proves that Yahuwah's will is not for everyone to not sin. Okay, so what I'm saying here is there are times where Yahuwah will cause wicked people to be more wicked. Okay, right here his will was for Achitophel to give him that advice. Yahuwah used Achitophel as a temptation to cause Absalom to sin. And it says here right in verse 14, for Yahuwah had ordained to nullify the good advice of Achitophel for the sake of Yahuwah, bringing evil upon Absalom. So basically, Yahuwah will send bad counsel to the wicked on purpose to cause them to sin even more. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, that's not right, Doug. That's not biblical. It says it right there. The idea that he doesn't want anyone to sin is a perversion of Ezekiel 33:3, and we talked about this last Shabbat. When he says, I do not desire the death of the wicked, he's not talking about the whole world. He's talking about those that he's called. He's talking about Israel. He's not talking about the whole world. Nowhere in the Bible, doesn't matter what Bible you have, will he ever say, I don't desire the world to perish. He will never say that. Matter of fact, it says, he has created the wicked for the day of destruction. What does that mean? He created evil people to die. So this is the problem, because we have been taught to reject predestination. We've been taught to reject election. We don't understand that Yahuwah has only appointed a certain amount of people to be saved. He is not. So this is the problem. And this is why we get these weird ideas from the Christian church. Oh, he doesn't want anyone to die in their sin. He doesn't want anyone not to be saved. If that's the case, he should have done what he did right here in verse 14 to Absalom. He's causing Absalom to be more wicked and more wicked and more wicked and more wicked. I'll give you another verse here that Yahuwah is bringing to my memory. If his will truly is for everyone to be saved and for everyone to turn to him, okay, let's go to the book of Revelations real quick. I'm going to show you guys how much of a fallacy that Christian idea is. Okay. Last chapter, Mom, in Revelations. Let the wicked be more wicked. And the righteous be more righteous.
Sounds like Daniel.
Revelations 22:11. So literally the very last chapter. So Revelations 22:11. He who acts unrighteously, let him act unrighteously still. Some translations will say even act more unrighteous. Okay, so let me try to find the scriptures. 2009 will actually say, he who does wrong, let him do more wrong. He who is filthy, let him be more filthy. He who is righteous, let him be more righteous. He who is set apart, let him be more set apart. So what does that mean? It means that Yahuwah is saying, those that are being called by me, let them become more set apart. Those that I have not called, let them become more wicked, who I have not called. That's what he's saying. So we have to unlearn this whole weird idea. Yahuwah doesn't want any single individual to perish in their sins. It's not biblical. And I understand where we get it from. We get it from this evangelistic mindset. I get it, but it doesn't match with the word. It doesn't. If anything, it's a universal spirit. It is a ecumenical spirit to preach that, because what you're saying is Yahuwah treats everyone the same, and he has everyone on an equal playing field. That's not the case. So, and it doesn't mean Yahuwah is bad for doing that. This is the problem, is the world has taught us if Yahuwah is not ecumenical, then that's evil to not be ecumenical. It's not evil. A parent is going to love a child that obeys them over a child that doesn't. Mm-hmm. We've been taught that supposedly, like, we are equating non-equality to favoritism. Favoritism is not the same as inequality. Inequality is the idea that there is, basically, the Bible does not teach equality, does not teach that he treats every human being the same, does not teach that he's going to give everyone mercy. That whole idea is from the world. And what's happened is Christianity has blended philosophy of men and wisdom of men from the world and tried to fit it into Yahuwah's word. You're not going to be able to do that. So that's the point I'm trying to drive home here, is that if you truly believe Yahuwah wants everyone to turn from their sins, every single person that's ever lived on this earth, all of them to turn from their sins, you're going to have problems when you get to passages like the one Brother Dennis read. You're going to have problems because Yahuwah is causing people to sin, certain individuals. He's causing the wicked to act more wickedly.
He hardens their heart.
So if he wants everyone to turn from their evil way, why would he do that? That's all I'm saying. We have to understand what is church tradition versus what the scriptures teach. And see, what the church does a lot, like I've preached on this so many times, and I feel like Yahuwah is trying to use me as a vessel to get it through to people's head, is the church does not pay attention to audiences. The church does not pay attention to the audience of each verse. The church doesn't want you to do that. They teach you the opposite. They teach you to use, if I can use a Christian term here, they teach you to use eisegesis and to put your own understanding into the text. When the text shows that there's certain people Yahuwah has a desire to be saved, and other people he doesn't. And it is very clear. He doesn't want his people to perish. That's why Ezekiel 33 says what it says. It says, speak to the house of Israel. Let if you say to the wicked, turn from his wicked way. Who is he considering the wicked? The house of Israel. He's not talking to anyone else in that chapter. He's not talking to a random heathen, a random atheist. He's talking about his own people that went apostate, that became wicked. So this is the problem. We're not taught how to look at the audience of a passage in a chapter. We're taught just to look at an isolated verse. Those of us that grew up in the church, and that's it. We don't look at the audience. We don't look at the context. We just look at a passage, a random passage. And then we try to ecumenicalize that passage for everyone, which causes contradictions. So that's all I'm trying to say is, guys, we need to start paying attention to the audience. We need to pay attention to where there are instances where individuals, Yahuwah causes their hearts to become hardened, causes them to sin on purpose, and it's because they're a vessel of wrath. That's why. We see this with Pharaoh of the Exodus. We see this with what's that guy, that king of Assyria, Sennacherib. He never repented. There's many individuals in Scripture that we see that with. So that's why, and I would recommend, if people are still having a hard time understanding this, go to the Potter's Vessel chapter in the book of Jeremiah. Go to there. Go to Romans, what is it, Mom? Romans 11? Or is it 7 or 11? That talks about the Potter's Vessel and talks about who are you to judge Yahuwah? That famous verse. Who are you to judge your maker? Hold on, let me see here. I know it's somewhere in the Bible, in the New Testament here. Romans is somewhere in Romans where he quotes from the Potter's Vessel chapter. Okay, so you go to Romans. Let's see, Vessel of Honor. Okay, they must use a different word. Okay. Vessels of honor. Honor and dishonor. Okay, 2 Timothy. That's another letter from Paul. I'm looking for Romans 9. Romans 9. So this is the famous chapter from Paul where, by the way, he's directly borrowing from the book of Jeremiah. This is not something new. So we go here. But who are you, O man, to talk back to Elohim? Shall that which is formed to say him who formed it, why have you made me like this? Does not the potter have authority over the clay? From the same lump to make one vessel for value and another not for value? And if Elohim, desiring to show wrath, to make his power known, aka Pharaoh, okay, which much patience tolerated the vessels of wrath, prepared for destruction. So this is the only reason a lot of atheists usually ask people this, right? Why does Yahuwah tolerate sin? This is why. Paul's giving you the answer here, why Yahuwah tolerates sin. He tolerated these vessels of wrath for the day of destruction, to be prepared for destruction. That's why he's tolerating sin. And that he might make known the riches of his esteem on the vessels of compassion, which he had prepared beforehand for esteem. So if anyone tries to tell you guys, oh, predestination is heretical, you got to throw away the book of Romans. Got to throw away the book of Romans because it says it right there. It says that those he knew beforehand. He knew beforehand who were going to be vessels of honor. He prepared beforehand for esteem, even whom he called, not only us of the Yahudim, but also of the Gentiles. Now, Mom, does verse 24 say the word, the world? Nowhere says the world, right?
Right.
So that means he has not called the whole world. Okay, just checking. It
Right.
says those of us of the Yahudim, not the whole Yahudim even, but also of the Gentiles. So what does that mean? It means that he chose from the foundation of the earth some natural-born Hebrews, some Gentiles to be grafted in, to be part of his kingdom. He did not choose all Israelites, even ethnically. He did not choose all of the world ethnically. So this is something that we're not taught. This is something that we're not taught in the church, is that that's how his election works. He is selective. He is not inclusive. He is not inclusive. He is exclusive. And this is something that the Christian church has literally preached another Basora. They've preached a mighty one, a Elohim, that is completely inclusive for everyone. And that's why when we come into this walk, we're all, we're like chickens running around with our heads cut off, because we're like, what the heck's going on here? We've been taught another good news is what happened. And so that's something we need to understand. So, and, so hopefully, that's for someone out there that needed to hear that. So hopefully, because I know we're going to come across more and more verses like that, where there's certain individuals, Yahuwah's even causing them to sin more than what they were already doing of their own. And Yahuwah his wills for them to actually take wicked counsel. So, I thought that was a really important, that's probably one of the most important. If you guys don't take anything else away from what I said today, just know that 2 Samuel 17:14 is a perfect example of that. Perfect example. And what was it, Mom, when Saul started sinning, right? What did Yahuwah do? He actually sent a lying spirit. Yahuwah actually told a lying spirit to attach itself to Saul, a demon. Okay, so think about that for a second. So Saul, what was he, a vessel of honor or dishonor? I would argue he was always to be a vessel of dishonor. The fact that Yahuwah chose him as judgment to his own people because they wanted a king. That's the right. Context of that. Right. Remember that. Exhibit A, why I think he's a vessel of wrath. His only purpose was to fulfill what Yahuwah said about them wanting their own king. He's like, all right, I'm going to give you a king, but the king I give you, he's going to do this, that, and the other to you. And Saul fulfilled that. And number two, like I said, he sent a demon to cause Saul to continue on sinning. Or you could even argue that it was maybe a fallen angel he sent to him, because it doesn't really give the context. It just says a lying spirit or whatever. So the point is, Yahuwah commanded that spirit to go to Saul. So would he do that with his elect? I really doubt it. So that's what we need to understand, is there's multiple examples of this. Vessels of mercy versus vessels of wrath in Scripture. There's multiple examples of it. And I'm not picking on like natural born Israelites. I'm just being honest here that Gentiles and natural born, not all of either are going to be in the kingdom. There are people from each ethnic group that are chosen to be part of Israel. Israel was never about a bloodline. This is the biggest problem people have, is that they isolate, Genesis 18 or this or that, or Genesis 12, I should say, sorry, I made a mistake there, Genesis 12, and they build a whole doctrine on one verse, not realizing that Yahuwah, very clear through Paul, says, if you are of Messiah, you're of the seed of Abraham. So those to be of the seed of Abraham always had to be the seed of Abraham through faith, whether you're natural born or not. So it was never solely about your bloodline. There's many natural born Israelite, no matter what tribe, that have not chosen Yahusha, that have not received Yahusha. So that's the biggest problem, is we get into this like Torah walk, and we almost latch on to Judaism's idea of what the seed of Abraham is. That's not true. You can't take one isolated verse when Yahuwah's given him this promise before we actually see the fulfillment of that promise. And before you actually realize it, by the way, the fullness of the Gentiles comes through Israelite. Okay? So basically, when you look at the prophecy of Ephraim in Genesis 48, right, what happened? Ephraim is not a purebred Israelite. He's not purely a Shemite. He has Hamite blood in him. Okay? So a part Hamite, part Shemite, through him, the fullness of the Gentiles, through his loins, the fullness of the Gentiles come. So it was never really about being a purebred Israelite. It never was. It never was. And so until you realize that, that's going to be a crucial part to understand about Yahuwah's promises and his fulfillment of the seed of Abraham. It's not only it was never solely about bloodline only. It never was. So that's one of the big things you need to understand about the seed of Abraham and the fulfillment of that promise. So it was always the seed of the woman versus the seed of the serpent, seed of the woman. So meaning that all of us come from Kua, right? All of us come from Adam and Kua. Those of us that are fully mortal and human. So it's not limited to one lineage. Okay. So, but anyway, let's see here. So I think that's it for today, right? Chapter 17 was it. Was there anything else, Mom, you wanted to bring out about 2 Samuel 17?
I think so. I found it interesting that David, at one point here, went to the Mount of Olives because he was upset. I'm trying to figure out where that was, but all that came to my mind was whenever our Savior, it seemed, wanted to find retreat or some kind of peace, that was where he went. So I think that's kind of a, I don't know, sort of an endearing connection between the two of them.
Oh yeah, I think also the Mount of Olives is where he returns. So it was more. I think it's more about him knowing that that's where.
Yeah, that's right.
That's where he ascended.
Right. Oh,
that's where he ascended. That's where he's going to descend.
And David would realize that because I was thinking of this the other day. Even though we think of David as this king, of course, and you know, who had so many gifts, he also had the gift of prophecy. He even though he lived at a time before Yahusha was made flesh, he knew him. He definitely knew him. We can see in a lot of his psalms that he knew him.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is incredibly beautiful.
Yep. Yep. Very true. Yeah. But a lot of these chapters today were very self-explanatory. There was like not a lot to really expound upon. A lot of it had to do with David's constant struggles with his son Abessalom. This last chapter I think was about. Let's go back to it. It was still continuing that thread. I think it had more to do with really explaining why Achitophel was sent to Abessalom. You all right?
Yeah.
The Jordan is mentioned here, so that's kind of interesting. The Jordan River. Just trying to see here. So you have the land of Gilead. So it looks like they were in the wilderness for a while, David and his men. So So it seems like basins and earthen vessels were brought to them: wheat, barley, flour, beans, lentils, parched vegetables. Interesting. Yeah, Achitophel, man, he seems like a little coward here earlier in the chapter. He ends up hanging himself.
Mhm.
Probably because he realized that once David found him, he was probably going to kill him. That's probably why he did that. Yep, that's pretty much it for that chapter. Um, yep, hopefully you guys got something out of this study today. Stay tuned, Yahuwah willing. We'll be going into chapters 18 to 20 next week, Yahuwah willing. And depending on, what Yahuwah wants us to do next Shabbat evening, we're either going to do Book of Hebrews again, or if Yahuwah wills, we might be going back to that manuscript study we've been doing. Also, I am working on a study for people that are just want to know why there's a need, especially for those brothers and sisters that have been asking me lately, about why we need a 13th month for the calendar and all that. I'm trying to work on a document right now to explain that from a scriptural standpoint so that we have an easy defense for people and all that. So, anyway, so have a great rest of your Shabbat, brothers and sisters out there. Yahuwah willing, see you guys next week. And Shabbat Shalom.